Hey there, one of the most common comments I get on my 7 tips video is, do I have any recommendations for players with smaller hands, or people with smaller hands that want to start playing guitar? What should they do? And it's difficult because I do have larger hands, so it's kind of hard for me to imagine that. But I do have some tips for you, and I just want you to be encouraged too, because there are a lot of great players. I just Googled guitarists with small hands, and Paul Simon, Andy Summers, Randy Rhoads, Angus Young from AC/DC. Those are all players listed as having smaller hands. Andy Summers surprised me because for years and years and years I taught Every Breath You Take like this. And that's a very difficult stretch between the 3rd and 4th finger. I watched a video just this morning about him playing it live, and he actually plays this chord with the 2nd finger instead of the 3rd finger there and the pinky out here, and he bounces his 1st finger. So even he's making an accommodation for his hand size. He probably couldn't play it this way, and I've been playing it this way. I've been playing it wrong all these years. One thing that happened when I was younger, one thing I've noticed is that if I line up the bottom of my hands, my left hand is slightly, I mean, we're talking a millimeter or 2 longer than my right hand, okay? And I'm right-handed, but my left hand is slightly longer. But what's really dramatic is my spread of my left hand is far wider. I'm going to spread my fingers as far as I can, line up my first fingers, and you can see how much further my pinky is out. That is just from years and years and years of playing. However, that may have mostly occurred while I was still growing, because I started playing when I was 9, I was playing in bands when I was 11 and 12, playing in clubs when I was 13, 14, 15, and I've been playing ever since pretty much all the time, full time. So a lot of that growth in my hand probably came from when I was still growing as a person. So, but that's, you know, that may, I don't know how much that can happen in your 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. But it certainly, I think the spreading part, I think you probably, the more you do spreading out chords or scales and things like that, you're gonna grow a little bit. So, you know, don't be too discouraged. Look up 2 guitar players. Django Reinhardt, he, at the age of 18, there was a fire in his caravan. He was a gypsy, and he lived in a caravan, and it was actually on his wedding night. And his whole left side of his body was burned badly. He was in a hospital for a very long time, and he was already a very good guitar player. But his 3rd and 4th fingers got fused together. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of videos out there of him playing, but he's one of the greatest guitar players of all time, and he only really had use of 2 fingers. It's astonishing to listen to him play and realize, wow, what, you know, how amazing is that? Phil Keaggy is one of the greatest fingerstyle guitarists of all time, and he doesn't have half of his middle finger on his right hand. So even with drastic limitations, you can overcome those, let alone just having shorter fingers or thicker fingers, okay? I get a lot of questions about what guitar should I get. Okay, that's a tough one. I'm going to put some links down below to like Baby Taylor and Baby Martin and things like that. Also, if your problem is that you have fat fingers, sometimes a bigger neck is a better way to go. For example, you've seen my Gibson folk singer. I play that a lot in my videos. That has basically the neck of a classical guitar. It feels like a classical guitar. A classical guitar neck is fatter, the strings, there's more space in between the strings. So it's a little bit, I think, easier for someone who's got difficulty kind of fitting all their fingers in. In my last video, my very last video, I talked about how even I will switch out fingers for an A chord, okay? So instead of playing an A chord with my first 3 fingers, I play it with my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th fingers, so that gives me a little bit more real estate. So there's some of that you can do if you're having trouble squeezing your fingers in, and you can re-finger some of the voices. You may not do them as somebody else suggests. You might have to do them in your own way. And I may do a video that provides chords for people with smaller hands or thicker fingers, and see, you know, if I can kind of accumulate a bunch of those, and we can work with some of those. But I'm going to talk about that more in a little bit, okay? So now I don't want to discourage you from playing guitar, But if you are discouraged and constantly frustrated with it, and you're banging your head against the wall, sometimes that means you need to make a change. And there are so many amazing instruments that don't require as big a hands as the guitar does. For example, I brought a bunch of them out here. Probably a very common one is ukulele. And ukulele is a great one to start on because you can learn some guitar fingerings. The ukulele is basically tuned the top 4 strings of a guitar at the 5th fret. Okay? So by learning some ukulele chords, you're going to start to recognize some guitar voicing. So you're going to learn some of that, but it's also a lot easier to play if your hands are small. In fact, I have a hard time because it's almost too small for me. But a D chord, if you played the D shape on a ukulele, this would actually be a G chord. This is a tenor uke, but it's tuned like a soprano. Okay, and that's much easier to play than a guitar. Also mandolin. Now mandolin's not tuned like a guitar, so the information that you would glean from playing mandolin would not necessarily transfer to the guitar. But if you decide that this is your instrument, then you can just get plain old good on this, because again, this is one where the frets are very small, and if you have small hands, it's actually an advantage. I have a hard time when I'm playing mandolin kind of squeezing my fingers in there, especially when you get the frets up here are very, very tiny. But you know, if you got it'd be much more fun to get good at something than to be frustrated with something. And if you can get good at mandolin, I'll tell you, every time I play mandolin anywhere, people are like, that's the coolest instrument ever. Also, see the foam? I'm going to talk about that later. That's a different video. Anyway, I get a lot of questions about that. In the same vein as mandolin is banjo. Banjo's got a very skinny neck on it. This is a 5-string, and that's that. Very empty. Now, banjo is a very odd instrument. It's not particularly. It's not tuned like a guitar. It's tuned like an open G chord. I mean, and a lot of the main thing about banjo is getting the right hand down. That's really the. Now that's I don't have my picks on, but basically the work on the left hand is much more minimal compared to the stuff that you're going to be doing on the right hand, the banjo. And this is a 5-string. You could also do a 4-string banjo. You don't even need to fret a dobro. You just need to be able to hold a bar in a hand. So if you're very limited with your left hand, if you have some injury or something, this would be a great instrument because it's such a it's such a great instrument. It's so fun to play, and all you have to do is hold a bar, and all the work is done over here on the right hand, and then you just kind of find the notes you want. Okay. Also, I'm going to keep going on this theme here. We got one more. I've had a couple students that they just couldn't get the guitar down, so I got them started on bass. And bass, this bass in particular, this is a Hofner, this is a Beatle bass. It's like the one Paul played in the Beatles. It's got a very narrow neck. It's very easy to play. I got flat wounds on here just like the Beatles would have had. And if you have fat fingers or short fingers, bass, particularly bass like this, is a very good call. And you know what? If you're playing bass and you're looking for work, you're probably going to be working more than if you play guitar. And if you're playing, because everybody needs a bass player in a band. Every band needs, and there's lots of people that want to play guitar, but there's less people that want to play bass. So, and I'm insulting bass players, but I don't mean to. But basically, no pun intended. You're going to find that you're going to get out and play more live, and that's a lot of fun. That's really the whole reason we're learning how to play, so we can get out and bless people with our music. So that's other thing that you can do. Okay, we can change the guitar. Now, the other thing that I think is probably the most important thing, and it's very, very important for guitar players, I think, to know all this, but one thing you can do is learn all the notes on your fretboard. I've talked about this before. And I'm going to tell you why. Because as you learn all the notes on your fretboard, you know what every single note is on this, on the neck, and you start to partner that with music theory knowledge, okay? Sure, you know, you might have trouble playing a G chord, C chord, A chord, whatever. You might have trouble playing bar chords, okay? But if you learn the notes in a G chord, you may realize, oh look, there's a G chord here. There's a G chord right here. And all of these are smaller, and you won't, in G7, they're much easier to play than some of these big giant bar chords. Okay? So that's another thing you can do. Another thing you can do is, if you want, you can start playing guitar, but just capo everything, start at the 5th fret. A couple things happen. One thing, the strings are now at fret height. So they're much lower, much easier to push down. So it's kind of a nice way to go as a beginner. Also, the frets are smaller. You're basically making it a shorter scale guitar. Granted, you're in the wrong key, so if the song's in G, you're actually going to be playing in C. But you could transpose a song so that you can play the songs in the same original key. It just wouldn't sound like the original song. But then as your fingers get a little stronger, as they get to be maybe grow a little bit or get better at being placed, then you can go down a fret. And then go down a fret, and maybe within a year you've got the capo off completely. So these are just some tips. I just want to encourage you to stick with music in general. If you have a real love for it, but you're really frustrated playing guitar, there's lots of ways you can work around that. And there's a lot of people that are great players that are playing with smaller hands. So don't fret. Oh, another pun. I'm so sorry. God bless you guys. Talk to you soon.